Welcome to the Prison Professors Podcast. We serve people who face challenges with prosecution, sentencing, and prison. My co-founders are Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny. My name is Michael Santos. We create digital content and our team offers individual consulting services. We also assist agencies that want to improve outcomes. To learn how we can help you, text the word PrisonPro to 44222. Again, text PrisonPro to 44222 and get our free brochure. You can also visit us at prisonprofessors.com or contact Justin at 818-424-2220. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Send confirmation that you reviewed our podcast and we'll send you a free digital book. Stay tuned for a 20 to 30-minute episode of Prison Professors.
Welcome to Prison Professors. I am Michael Santos, and today we have an opportunity to listen and learn from a young lady who went into the criminal justice system, but she came back with a real willingness to contribute to society and help others who are going through challenges. In fact, she is a prison professor, and she has been working with my partner, Justin Paperny, for, I think a couple of years now, and we are going to learn from her today about what it was like going inside, how she prepared, what she may have liked to have done differently, and maybe we'll learn a little bit about what she's hearing from some of the many people that she helps. So Kathy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. Why don't you give our audience a little background into your life?
Hi, Michael. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Kathy Kaplan. Like you said, I've worked with Justin for a couple years now, helping defendants prepare, helping prepare the PSR files, and doing a multitude of things for the defendants looking at a federal prison sentence. I was pled guilty and convicted in 2013. I self-surrendered in July of 13 to Bryan Federal Prison Camp. It's a prison camp for women. About 1,000 inmates are there. I chose that camp, or asked the courts to recommend that camp, because they had a lot of programming, a lot of things to keep me busy during the day. I knew some of the programs that they had there, so I was very lucky and fortunate, I felt, to be designated to Bryan, and I surrendered on July 2nd, 2013. And I was released from the BOP in January of 2015. I had a 21-month sentence.
Can you slow us back and take us back a little bit to let us know? You said that you were convicted. Could you let our audience know about what the nature of the crime was and how you learned that you were the target of a criminal investigation?
Yeah, the nature of the crime was computer fraud. Actually, they changed it to theft of trade secrets. I was involved with one of my assistants and another guy from the company. They had stolen some data, and then I found out about it. I didn't turn them in, so I was part of aiding and abetting theft of trade secrets. Well,
not the type of thing somebody thinks they're going to go to prison for.
No, it wasn't.
How did you learn that you were a target?
Well, my husband and I moved to Ecuador in 2011, early 2011. I went back on my second visit, came back to the United States on my second visit to visit my son, and I was arrested. So it was clearly out of the blue. I had no idea why they arrested me. The FBI and the prosecutors, everything. Once they told me the charges and once I understood, I said, you're right, I'm guilty. I did not do the right thing by turning these people in. I thought that I didn't know it was criminal. I thought it was certainly immoral. I should have done the right thing, but I didn't. And therefore, I knew right away that I would sign a plea deal and try to get this over as quickly as I could.
How did you get that kind of advice about, generally when somebody's not involved in crime and they're out of the blue targeted for prosecution, they don't understand that I want to get a plea agreement at the soonest possible time. Yet you said that you did. Where did you get that level of insight?
Well, and when I say the soonest, it was definitely a year into my case before a plea agreement even came up. So that was really difficult because my husband and my family, part of my family, were down in Ecuador, and I knew that I wanted to do my prison sentence. As soon as I learned that I will be doing time, my attorney told me, there's no question about it, you will do some time in prison. I knew that I wanted to get it done as quickly as I could to get back to my family in Ecuador. I negotiated a plea, probably met with him 6 or 7 times negotiating a plea agreement. We finally got it down where I had no supervised release at the term of my prison sentence, but the judge still gave me 2 years of probation supervised release after my term.
Quite a shock. And how does one prepare a law-abiding citizen, certainly doesn't set out to do criminal behavior, yet finds themselves pleading guilty to a crime and sentenced to a federal prison, and then yet you had the foresight to know to look at one particular prison and try and maneuver your way or engineer your way to get to that prison. Tell our audience a little bit about the preparations that you did that put you on that path.
Well, as soon as I was arrested, I kind of took it from the standpoint, okay, I have cancer, if you will, and I have to find out everything I can about the criminal justice system. I knew nothing about it. I read every single one of my attorney's cases. I read every single one of my prosecutor's cases. I read everything I could do. And then I hired a consultant. It wasn't Justin or you, but he was a good consultant. I hired him right when I entered the plea agreement so he could help me with that, or entering my plea of guilty, and helped me prepare for Bryan prison camp.
And how did you hear about Bryan prison camp? Was that from the consultant?
It was from the consultant, because it was really for me up to either Victorville, if I were going to put in ask for a recommendation, Victorville or Bryan. Victorville is much closer to my family that's still in Las Vegas. However, it was a smaller camp, and I felt like I would have a better day in and day life in Bryan instead of the smaller with not quite as much to do, or even Phoenix as well. So that's how we kind of came across Bryan, and I felt very lucky. Once I started reading about it, looking at the programs, they had a horticulture program that I was very interested in, which I completed. They just had so many things to do that I knew I'd be fine, even if my family couldn't visit me quite as often as they would be able to in Victorville.
I think that's really an important message that you've just given to people, is to really understand, what do you value? How are you going to define success when you're going into that system? And if you can do that, you might find one institution may be better suited for you than another. And certainly, to the extent that you can get information about different prisons and talk to as many people as you can and learn as much as you possibly can, you put yourself in a better position to have a successful journey. Tell us a little bit about what a successful journey looked like for you while you were inside, Kathy. What was a typical routine like for you as you passed those weeks and months away from your loved ones?
Well, first of all, I wanted to make sure that I never forgot that it was harder on my friends and family with me being incarcerated than it was on me on a day-to-day life. And I wanted to remember that, because I always wanted to, with my family, make sure that I put them at the top, that I never complained to them, that I worked hard every day while I was in there to make it a success. I had 2 years before I went in that I wasn't able to travel or anything on pretrial release. So I felt like I was absolutely prepared for Bryan. My son took me to surrender. We did a little mini vacation beforehand in Austin and Dallas, and I was ready. I couldn't have been more ready. I got into that front door and I said, okay, let's get this going, because now I had an end date. And that was really important to me, to have an end date, to know that this will end, and to know I can, resume my life with my husband in Ecuador or wherever it may be. A typical day for me was I stayed very busy. So I went to horticulture school in the mornings, and that was about a 4-hour class. Then we broke for lunch, went and I worked in the garden in the afternoon, cleaned up, had a shower, went to dinner early. They have dinner about 4:30, 5 o'clock. And then I did a creative writing class Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays from 6 to 8. And it was a 6-week class. The professor came from Texas A&M, along with the professor for my horticulture class came from Texas A&M as well. And so my day was really busy. You know, I'd get up early in the morning and go walking on the track or run a little bit, listen to my music. I would write a little bit when I got home from the creative writing class. And of course, I wrote a lot inside the classroom. And that's pretty much my day. I read when I could before I went to sleep at night. And I just stayed as busy as I could. I had 3 goals when I went inside, where I'm not going into prison to build a career. I'm not going into prison to be a guard. And I'm not going to prison to really make friends with any guards. I just wanted to do my time, and I wanted to be as invisible, if you will, as I could. I wanted to work on me. I didn't want to get involved in the drama at the prison camp. I just wanted to work on me, my family, keep my marriage as strong as possible. And actually, it came out even stronger, it's pretty hard to believe, but it did through this experience. And that's what I was able to accomplish. I had very definite goals about that, though. And I had to remind myself every day to stick by the goals, because it was easy to get, wrapped up in the drama or, complain to your husband or your children or something. And I just didn't want that.
There's an old saying in prison that says the days pass like years and the years pass like days. It can feel like it takes forever to wait for mail call or something like that. But then after a year, you look back and said, where did all the time go?
Right.
And I can tell you that to the extent that you follow the very sage wisdom that we just heard from Kathy Kaplan, time passes much more effectively if you're busy, if you're deliberate, if you know what you're striving to achieve. And so anybody who's going in there will really do well to learn from that strategy, whether it is reaching out to somebody who's been through it and can give you advice, reading books, reading articles, but to the extent that you can understand where you're going, you really put yourself on a better position to succeed through prison and upon your release. My question for you, Kathy, is how did you see the other women adjusting in prison? We know that there are very high recidivism rates, that there are very high rates of failure coming out of our prison system. I always argue that it's the decisions that a person makes while inside that results in them having a good experience or a bad experience. What did you see with regard to the adjustment patterns as a rule for the women with whom you were serving time?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Michael. With a lot of the women, we had young women in there as well. Probably 50% of the women there were between 20, 30, and 30s, probably under 40. They had a very hard time. They didn't understand the discipline. They wanted to complain to their families on the phone. They had a very hard time. They were angry and bitter, and they just couldn't accept the fact that they were in prison. I looked at it like, I've already lost the battle. I'm certainly not going to lose the war. And I just, I would talk to them here and there. I can remember specifically this young woman, she was about 25, and she was screaming and yelling at her mother for feeding her son Cheerios for dinner. And, it just was astounding to me because she's in prison. She obviously couldn't feed him anything, and she's yelling at the caretaker. And it's like, man, you guys have to realize where you are. It's serious. It's not time for games. It's a serious time in your life that can really be life-changing if you prepare for that. And every day work towards it. My other bunkie about my age, in her mid-50s, she read every day. She did not get off of her bed. And unfortunately, she was in front of the judge again when she got into supervised release because she could not follow the rules. She just thought it was like, okay, a time for time out and a vacation, and I'm just going to read. And she wouldn't even, get her own water most of the time. So it really amazed me at how lackadaisical a lot of these younger women took it. They were angry and bitter and would not would not, step up to the plate and make it easier for their families or for themselves, really, for when they got out.
And when you got out, what types of challenges did you face when you transitioned into the halfway house, and if you had any on supervised release? But let's start with the halfway house. What was that experience like?
The halfway house was it was a little bit of a struggle at first. It was complete different change. The staff, or the guards, if you will, were super nice, which I wasn't used to. Very respectful. The residents, however, were completely different. They all the kind of culture inside of prison where, you respect your elders and you do this, and it was all gone in the halfway house. They were playing awful music and cussing and smoking, and it was just a different culture. So even more so in the halfway house, I really had to stay focused because of all the outside influences, and not get mixed up and turn in your cell phone every night and all the little rules that you have to follow, which I think it's harder on some people that are used to making rules instead of following rules. That was one of the surprising things for me, is all the little tiny rules, like don't wear your flip-flops before 4 o'clock, really was hard for me at times. I would look down and I'm like, oh no, I have my flip-flops still on, when I was in prison. And I'd have to try to, get back without anybody seeing me to my dorm. Especially in your first couple months, because you're so overwhelmed with everything. You really have to keep a list, or, what you can do, what you can't do. It was just, and the halfway house was just all the more difficult. It was co-ed. There were men in there that have been locked up longer than you were, Michael.
That's a pretty long time.
Yeah, and they didn't know how to use a cell phone. They didn't know, it was a tough experience, but it was well worth it too, because I got to leave. I got to, resume some part of my life during the day at the halfway house, and I could eat regular food. I know there was so many women at Bryan that chose to not take advantage of the halfway house. They chose to do their halfway house time inside because they didn't want to go through that change and that stress of a change. But it was.
And how about when you transitioned out of the halfway house and started supervised release? What was that experience like?
That was fairly easy for me. I knew that I had to, be on top of communications with my probation officer. I always paid my restitution the first day of the month. I wanted to do everything I could to be able to travel to Ecuador while I was on supervised release. So I was probably a little overboard with the rules, if that's even possible, but I made sure that I did everything that they requested, and half the time they requested it. And I was able to go to Ecuador and visit for 10 days, 4 months into my supervised release, which was great. I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. But
did you have a financial restitution order or a fine or anything like that?
I did. $3.2 million restitution order.
So as long as you were compliant with the terms of paying that restitution, that was sufficient that your probation officer allowed you a level of liberty. Is that right?
That's correct. I paid it. I paid the restitution every month. I turned in all the forms. I didn't break any of the rules. So yes, she and the PSR investigative officer at my sentencing asked the judge at that time if they could approve my travel while I was on supervised release, which I thought was very kind of them. Another blessing for me. And the judge approved that. So we didn't even have to go through the judge for me to travel to Ecuador. I just put in travel paperwork and they approved it.
Well, I would argue that you really started sowing the seeds for that at the earliest possible stage, and that's an important lesson for anybody who's going into the criminal justice system or anybody who is in prison right now. You can hear from Kathy that she prepared herself before she went inside. She participated actively in programs while she was inside. She avoided disciplinary infractions while she was inside, and then she complied with the halfway house when she was there. All of those are effectively seeds that make it a little easier for her to reap the harvest of higher levels of liberty. And it's important for people to realize that when they're in prison, that some of your decisions that you'll be making every single day may have a big influence on whether you're able to accomplish things like traveling outside of your jurisdiction, or in some cases even outside of the country, even while you're on supervised release. So that's really good advice that you just provided, and I hope people take that lesson away.
Absolutely. And, I think another big lesson is, especially for, higher executives going into prison, is they must keep their expectations low and understand that sometimes there is just no logic in prison, and you just have to go with it. Why? Because they can. And that too, I think, was the one that surprised me the most. They could run the commissary better. They could do this better. They could do that better. That's not a priority for them. A priority for them is keeping it safe inside. And, that wasn't important. But I saw so many times that people would get so frustrated at the stupid little rules that it's just not worth it. So I like to tell the clients to take out the word why from your vocabulary and understand that if they ask you to do something or mandate you do something, just do it. It's way easier because you'll never win that argument, ever, especially with, 1,000 inmates in the prison.
I think you're giving a lot of people really great advice in that you have to define success. In our lives, we define success as, well, we really want to get out of prison as fast as we possibly can. We want to get back to our families. We want to get back to a life of meaning and relevance. But that's not necessarily the system's definition of success. For them, it's making sure that the security of the institution is the highest priority. And they're going to make decisions from that viewpoint, not from the viewpoint of, gee, how can I help this particular individual have a higher level of liberty? In fact, you should expect not only to not ask why, but you should expect obstructions and expect to meet resistance, and then yet make a commitment that's going to help you succeed anyway. That's what I certainly believe Kathy has done, and that's what I think that all people should do, is they should prepare a deliberate course of action that'll carry them through the journey and expect that they're going to meet resistance from the system, but never lose sight of what the end game is, and that's to come home.
Yes, that's absolutely correct, Michael.
What are you hearing? What types of questions are you getting from people who work with you and ask you to help them get ready for the journey inside? What does your work typically look like?
Pretty much we try to start with the client as early as we can, before even a plea agreement is done or the PSR, because we can help in so many ways. By us doing the PSR forms, we can give the officer more of a flavor of what they're like, instead of trying to remember what the defendant said and then trying to write it down later. They're busy. The probation officers are so busy. So we try, I think that's a big help, especially if they wanted to get into RDAP or something. And then, we help them with all the financial forms. We tell them that they're going to have to do this while they're on probation. So they're aware of the forms. They're comfortable with the forms. They can handle it when they get out of their probation or their prison sentence. And then, they want to know, what's it like inside? What is the culture like? What would my typical day be like you just asked? Is it safe there? Is it, is there violence? And that was another thing I was so surprised on, that it was how safe it was. I felt like I was in a very safe environment, probably one of the safest places in the United States to be is in a federal prison camp. It might not be fun, but it's definitely safe. Very, very little fights did I see. If I did, they had a girlfriend. So that's, causes a whole nother side of drama. And people just want to know how to stay connected with their family, how to stay connected with their inner circles, and to have, when they are released, that they have many options for working, for support. That's our goal. So there's hardly a blip in the radar when you get out. You just start your life up. You have these people that are still in your life to help find a job or go to school. I went to school when I was in the halfway house in probation. So I was finishing my degree, and it was great. It was a great time for me to do that. Even though I'm, well into my 50s, it was just a perfect time to do that. And I finished it, and I feel accomplished, and the probation department was very happy, So it is a trickle-down effect all the way down.
Have there been any lasting influences from the fallout from having a criminal conviction that you've experienced since you concluded your obligation to the Bureau of Prisons?
Not really. I think it's really surprising how many people have a felony conviction, whether it's state or federal. And for me, the last hurdle was getting my visa, my permanent residency visa in Ecuador, which I just got. It took about 8 months. But, they needed an FBI report. They needed, a state report. And I was a little nervous about that, but absolutely no problems. They asked me about it. I told them I served my time. I did this, I did that. And I'm done. I can't imagine that there's going to be any further lasting effects on it, except for the good. There's many things I'm very grateful for that experience, I can say today. I've been off supervision for 1 year almost exactly this month.
Did you get early termination from that, or did you do the entire journey?
I did the entire 2 years. I put in a motion after a year, but the judge didn't acknowledge it, and I just did the whole 2 years. And so, like I said, there's many things that I'm grateful for. I have so much more patience. I don't take the little things seriously as much as I used to. My marriage is stronger. My relationship with my children are stronger. I've been able to give up control in a lot of things that I shouldn't even be trying to control. So I am extremely grateful. Now I can say after 5 years, from actually almost 7 years when it all started, it's done. I'm done. And I'm better for it. I can say that now.
Well, you're not really done, because you're still working with other people who are going into the system, and you're inspiring them. And that's part of our pursuit of really just trying to give back and help others have a better experience. And we're just so grateful that we can rely upon your expertise to guide others. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to share your story with us. I think anybody in our audience who's listened to Kathy can hear that she is a woman who has really her dignity intact. Her confidence is restored. She's gone through the system, but with a very deliberate plan. And I can assure you, Kathy's experience is not the norm. Many people go through this criminal justice system and they struggle, and they have a hard time finding employment, and they have a hard time getting back in the groove of things. And really, a lot of times it is an individual's attitude going in that can have a direct influence on how they come out. So I hope more people will listen and learn from Kathy and others. And again, I just want to thank you so much for taking this time out of your busy schedule to speak with our audience. And I'm going to leave the last word with you, Kathy. Are there any final words that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I would just like to say it's absolutely true. Each day you work towards that end goal. When you surrender to the prison camp, you surrender your freedom, of course, but you also surrender a lot of other things, control and worry, and you have that ability. And you can just focus on yourself, your family, your marriage, your children, and just know that you have the ability to make the best out of this horrible situation. And it will turn around if you have that every day in your mind when you wake up in federal prison.
Well, that is absolutely correct, and we heard it in her voice. We see it in her actions. I am Michael Santos with Prison Professors, and I want to thank you for listening to our program. If you'd like to know more about our work, please visit us at prisonprofessors.com or text the word Prison Pro to 44222. That's text Prison Pro to 44222, and we will send you a brochure that that shares a little bit more about the different ways that we strive to improve outcomes of the criminal justice system for both individuals and systems alike. We'll be back tomorrow with another inspiring guest. I am Michael with prisonprofessors.com. And on behalf of my partners, Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny, we thank you. Thanks.